Welcome to your in-depth monthly astrology overview and Zodiac forecast for August 2025. I'm going to share some standout details to look out for to begin with. Then on screen, the event chart right at the start of August, which always provides an influential backdrop for the whole month. I'll then go through all the key influences frame by frame to give a clear picture of what we can collectively expect this month. Please stay with me. I'll then go through each of the 12 zodiac signs from Aries through to Pisces, which you can relate to in terms of your ascendant, sun or the moon. Thank you so much for joining me, astrologer Patrick Arundell. All your views and interactions are truly appreciated. If you've yet to subscribe to the channel, please help it to continue to thrive by doing so now, but please also do click or tap the bell notification symbol. I'm going to also share about my website. My new website, patrickarundell.com, is going from strength to strength. Thank you so much if you've visited. You can get your free daily, weekly, monthly, yearly general, love and Vedic horoscopes, and also enjoy my free 3-card tarot. If you'd like to work with me one-to-one, please check out my testimonials below. It's always an amazing privilege to work with people. Please see what people have said working with me. Also, year 2025 is rattling by. If you'd like to take advantage of my special offer, you can order your 2026 transits now, get the rest of this year free, but also in my special package, your Life Roadmap Report. I feel this document is the most valuable thing any of us can ever read because it helps us to understand the patterns that are played out in our lives so far, but gain a much more intimate understanding of those. Together with the forecast, it helps us to time our moves much better. Please see the link below for more. Finally, thank you so much if you've become a member of YouTube, and also thank you very much to my patrons. If you'd like to become either, please see below. I have set the payment levels as accessible as possible. Now, as we come into this month, we do start with a Leo season still very much roaring away. But if you recall, as July came to a close, Mercury, the planet of communication in Leo, was in an exact unified conjunction with the Sun. That's known as a cazimi, but because of Mercury's retrograde, an inferior conjunction. But it doesn't mean to say that we can't focus on our talent, creativity and passion as we burst into this month. It's just saying we need to be cautious about controlling how we share information, how we interact with people, because sometimes with all the goodwill in the world, someone can take what we say the wrong way. So as much as we can be clear, that's a good thing. But it's also important to know that Mercury retrograde is an opportunity to reset, recalibrate and approach things in a fresh and more effective way. So we must see it as an opportunity. But as we come into this month, Neptune and Saturn are in retrograde in the early part of Aries still, and they are going to continue to be very influential this month. But we also have Mars getting to the end of its journey in the sign of Virgo, and Mars is going to burst into the 6th, and that can have a challenging impact, but also a very positive one. I'm going to unpack that for you too. We have a full moon on the 9th. What's the significance? Mercury goes direct on the 11th. Is that the end of it? On the 12th, and more broadly through week 2, there's one of astrology's most favourable influences. I want to share that with you as well. Now, if you recall, on the 7th of July, Uranus, the planet of freedom, innovation, higher truths that rules the sky, mythically went into the air sign of Gemini and begins this month still in a glorious alliance with Saturn, Neptune and Pluto, so the golden triangle. But he is going to clash as the Sun moves into the more pragmatic Virgo on the 22nd and will feed into the new moon of the 23rd. The 25th does, however, see some more Leo energy emerge, with Venus getting seriously glamorous as she glides into the sign then, but does go into a complex relationship as the month draws to a close. So lots to unpack and unpick for you. Please stay with me for more. So on the screen now, we have the event chart right at the start of August. Let's look at the lunaries. So there's the sun, and you can see Mercury just beyond the sun now. So Mercury's retrograde continues to the 11th, but if you have got a creative idea or something you feel passionate about, don't be put off by Mercury being retrograde per se. It's still down to each individual to use the thinking, but also the communicational talents of Mercury in the proud sign of Leo to make it work for us. But I think what is more complex at the start of this month is later on the first day, we're going to have a quarter moon. And that quarter moon is where the moon is very challenged in her fall in the sign of Scorpio. And on the screen, you can actually see the moon is in a square with the modern ruler of Scorpio, Pluto, as the month starts. And later in the day, as the moon moves forwards and forges that square with the sun, and Mercury's in the mix as well, what's important is to understand where we want to express ourselves, but we feel inhibited because someone's being controlling or perhaps possessive, or in some ways not releasing us to be a free spirit. That could be an issue through the first week of this month. Also, when it comes to relating, although we know that Saturn and Neptune are forging a positive link with Uranus and Pluto, they are in a clash with the planet of relating, Venus. So you can see Venus starts this month just into the sign of Cancer, and is going to be merging with Jupiter by the 12th, one of astrology's most beautiful influences. In fact, from the 9th to the 15th, they're beginning to build that relationship up. But also at the start of this month, if you look at the position of Mars, he's broadly opposite Saturn and Neptune and broadly square with Venus. So I think there's going to be a lot of intensity as we go into August. So the more passionate and flamboyant and charismatic energy of Leo may be there, but I feel that there is the potential for misunderstandings, for harsh words, for truths to be expressed, but particularly around relationships and perhaps also around shared finances and resources. Because the 5th house, or the sign of Leo, can be about speculation, if you're thinking about speculation at the start of this month, it's vital that you get all the information you need absolutely clear. Now, by the 6th, Libra receives Mars, exactly, and then the opposition starts to build up with Saturn and Neptune very quickly. So when we have Mars and Saturn in a relationship, it can create frustration. Imagine driving with the handbrake on. But Mars, of course, is in its detriment in Libra, and Saturn in his full in Aries. So what we've seen since Saturn's moved into Aries, particularly in the conjunction with Neptune, is lower physical vitality collectively. We've also seen some very authoritarian language and political manoeuvring that has in some ways affected those people who may be more vulnerable. So that's very much to do with Neptune. But what Mars can do, it may be going face to face with them. It may be in a sign where he can find it a little more challenging to speak his truth. But I think we're going to be surprised, because through the 8th to the 10th, Mars forges one of the most stunning alliances with Uranus and Pluto. And if ever there was a time when people are going to be very much more invested in things like social justice, fairness, the rule of law. It's going to happen across those days. And the people who have in some ways been trying to control the agenda, the narrative, and also being very forceful, downright aggressive, they're going to get a big pushback. And of course that will be welcome. But that brings us to the full moon of the 9th. It's in the sign of Aquarius, which can be about rebelliousness. It certainly can be about higher truths. And most certainly it can also be about us as a collective who are connected. And of course Pluto in the sign is about the collective. So it's interesting. So I feel that with Mercury going direct on the 11th, there's going to be a bit of a pushback from the we against the I, which can be Leo at its lower harmonic level. So if something is out of kilter, and basically people have been using their personality power and charisma in order to create an image that some people have bought into, there's going to be plenty of other people who are going to be much more militant around that time. But we also have the potential for healing with Venus and Jupiter coming together. It's lovely if you're wanting to modify where you live, perhaps tend to the garden, do some painting and decorating, buy some new furnishings, add to the family, get together for a gathering with loved ones, throw a party. If you are playing host, the chances are you're going to want to do it in a very, very positive way. But then on the 22nd, we have the Sun returning after 11 months to the practical, precise sign of Virgo, where Mars was for the first week of this month. Now, the energy that Mars helped us with in Virgo was to be a bit more self-sacrificing, to focus on the details, and the Sun can help us to do that. But the sign of Virgo helps us to celebrate order, routines, the details, things being a bit more metronomic. It's just this year, for the first time in over 70 years, Uranus in Gemini is clashing with the Sun in Virgo and with the new moon in Virgo on the 23rd. So we're going to see some order that has been maintained be challenged. So there could be some disruption through the last part of this month, maybe to food distribution, maybe around healthcare. I feel that there's going to be more and more energy coming into the open where people are not prepared to accept the status quo, and particularly where there has been a lack of fairness. But we still have the opportunity for some glamour before the end of this month. At the end of the day, Virgo can be a very practical sign, very focused on those everyday matters, but the arrival of Venus into the sign of Leo on the 25 is adorable. So Venus here loves to socialize, can be very interested in fashion, the dedicated follower of fashion, in partying and getting together, being much more interactive and social. So how do we deal with that overlapping with the 6th house new moon? Well, I feel that for some people, there could be the opportunity to socialise with people they work with, or we could have a connection romantically in a very ordinary situation, such as a gym, fitness suite, perhaps a car park, a train station, the supermarket queue. But seriously, Venus moving into Leo is an opportunity to focus on talent, particularly talent that needs to come out. But it is always important to make sure with Leo energy that we're aware of the energy in Aquarius, which is how we all connect. And sometimes Leo energy, if it's too focused on the ego and not enough on how things will affect people generally, that can cause some problems. And when Venus and Pluto clash, we can encounter someone who can be brilliant at charming and laying on that charm with a celestial ladle, and in some ways seducing us with their flattery and warmth in a way that is very hard to resist. But usually there is some kind of hidden motive, Pluto. But it could be that we will encounter someone we find absolutely captivating. But it's important to try to decipher if someone isn't quite being as sincere as they could. So just watch out that someone could use their warmth and personality power to compel. So if it's around assignation romantically or a financial opportunity, just be sure about what you may be getting into. So if you encounter someone who you find very irresistible and you both agree what the deal is, fine. But if one person wants something more profound and the other person wants a fleeting fling, it could end up feeling quite painful. And remember, with Mars in the sign of Libra, relationship matters are going to be very much to the fore from the 6th of this month, whether it's through the glamorous charismatic Leo or the practical precise Virgo. But trying to get a better give and get around all sorts of relationships is definitely going to be a theme from the 6th onwards. Please stay with me as I go through each of the 12 zodiac signs. So Aries, your August 2025 forecast begins with your ruler broadly in an opposition with Saturn and Neptune in your sign, but both squaring up to Venus. So Venus is at the point of the T-square. Now Venus in Cancer is very much about peace, tranquility, improving our homes, making sure that the core of our existence is just very nurturing and reassuring. So if there is a relationship issue which is not quite going to plan, or it may even be a home improvement scheme, a contractor's not being very reliable, it would be easy at the start of this month, especially if someone within your closer family unit is not quite getting where you're coming from, to really let exasperation get the better of you. And I would try to resist that, because with Mercury retrograde at the start of the month, but in a very charismatic link still with the Sun, your humour, charm and personality power are probably going to be better assets to you than trying to rush anything which is not moving quite as quickly as you would like. Because think back to the 25th of May, Aries, because the chances are, even in fact through to the end of March, when Neptune moved into your sign, you probably have felt that things haven't been going quite as rapidly as you would like, and it may have felt like you've been walking through the proverbial glue. And also your physical energy may be a little on the low side, which means that if people aren't quite getting what you want to do, whether it's a home improvement scheme, whether it's moving, whether you and someone close to you see something very differently, if you let your exasperation get the better of you, I don't actually feel it's going to be very helpful. But if you're thinking more about ideas, creativity, moving forwards for the long term of your situation, there's lots to be excited about at the start of this month. But it is true that Mars, your ruler, will move into a new home on the 6th. And that new home is asking you in the following 6 weeks to be more mindful, not just of relationships, but perhaps of how other people see you. That's not easy for all of us. We can be profoundly subjective at times. And with Saturn and Neptune so closely together in your sign, there could be a pinch point that's reached from around about the 3rd through to about the 9th or 10th, when you do feel that one relationship feels quite hostile, and it may feel that it's reached a really difficult juncture, and there could be very powerful energies exchanged. But if you do find that someone is not really being very collaborative or cooperative, I still feel the best way is try to keep the lines of communication open. The full moon on the 9th is going to see the moon in Aquarius, which is very much about being very fair, even-handed, trying to see the other person's viewpoint. It's really asking you, particularly around any tension around relationships, to understand the give and take. It's easy for us to be much more focused on just the take. But if you can see another person's viewpoint, I feel that you'll be surprised by how quickly tensions can start to dissipate. And on the 11th, something that's just felt quite ragged, or perhaps there's someone you've been drawn to that hasn't been very reliable, suddenly things can start to move forwards. In fact, if you meet someone between the 8th and the 10th that you do really like, oh my word, it could be really surprising just how much charisma is exchanged between you. In fact, it could be very, very electric and very, very exciting between you. But also, if you do want to get closer to someone, from the 9th to the 15th, I feel that Venus's conjunction to Jupiter asks you to be open to the more vulnerable side of yourself, and also to the more nurturing side of yourself. A great thing to do if you're getting to know someone new would be to go somewhere that's very, very beautiful, particularly if it is in nature or by water, or go to a lovely hotel or bar and really indulge and spoil your senses. And I think that's going to be something that could be very restorative with you. But it is true that on the 22nd, the Sun is asking you to think more about life's more practical details. Now, if you have met someone earlier in the month, one of the challenges here is you could start to computate what the various little differences are between you. Totally natural. We all would do that, but because Uranus is squaring up with the Sun as the Sun arrives into Virgo this year for the first time in so very many years, it's a key moment. And just know that Uranus for you is in a very quick moving, quick thinking part of your chart. So it can create a lot of tension. And again, there could be a temptation to try to rush something. And I would resist that. Also, don't try to pack in too much virtuous catching up around chores and do-it-yourself tasks that may have been put off in the latter part of this month. I think you are going to be quite wired up. One of the good things you can do on the new moon is to think about your physical well-being. Whether you're approaching your exercise regime in a fresh way, what you're eating and drinking, how much sleep you're getting, whether you're delegating, or perhaps even nagging those people who are taking you for granted domestically to do their bit, just working with the tension that Uranus can create in a productive way could actually be very valuable. Now, if you've got beyond that little stage when the differences between you and someone may have been amplified, actually as the curtain comes down on this month, there is the chance to feel very alluring. And if your personal appearance is very important to you, you may decide to go and have some kind of treatment, a spa day, do something that helps to give you a boost in terms of your well-being, your energy, or your appearance. You may even find yourself splashing out and buying yourself something really quite lovely, which will give you an extra sense of confidence. But don't underestimate just how alluring you can be towards the end of this month. So it is, to be honest, Aries, quite a complex month. But if you work with the Mars energy in your 7th house, which is basically understanding the 7th house can be about where we set our boundary, and Mars there could encourage you, if you feel someone's been taking you for granted, to know when to say no, and also explain why. But also it can be where we engage. So if you're an active person, it can be great if you want to take part in some kind of combative sporting exercise, tennis, squash, badminton, where you have a direct opponent. But it can also be very good for challenging competitors at work. So the 7th house isn't just about neat relationships, but if you are wanting to improve the one you've got or bring someone new into your world, the trick is being much more astute about how other people might see you, but also understanding what they want from you as much as making it clear what you want from them. Have a great August, Aries. All the best. And goodbye. So Taurus, your August 2025 forecast begins with you thinking, I feel, very carefully about a home, family or property matter, with Mercury combining with the Sun as you come into the month. Mercury is retrograde through to the 11th, it's true. There may be a need to be patient. Something may not work quite as you expect. It may be important to adapt. And also at the start of the month, the moon is in your sector of relating. And the quarter moon, which is forged on the first with the sun in Leo, suggests that even someone you ordinarily usually get along well with, there is the potential for some cross wires. Also, your ruler, Venus, is in a very charming location at the start of the month, but someone could bring up an old issue with Saturn and Neptune square into her, and that could be a little bit challenging and perhaps even feel a little bit bruising too. But Mars starts this month in the part of your chart to do with being expressive and enthusiastic, but is still broadly in an opposition with Saturn and Neptune. But from the 6th, that opposition really starts to bite. And with Mars moving into the part of your chart to do with everyday details, it's going to be important in the following 6 weeks not to rush things and to take shortcuts, because someone may only be too keen to remind you about something you've forgotten to do, or perhaps bring up again an old issue, but in a way which is quite critical of your situation. However, on the 9th, the part of your chart which is very much to do with your connection to the wider world may remind you that despite that more homely, emotional dimension at the start of August, there may be some worldly issues that you do need to grapple with. But what's going to help you through the 9th through to the 15th is your ruler Venus forges a potentially very lucky conjunction with Jupiter. Your words can take on more resonance. With Mercury going direct on the 11th, something that has been frustrating can just start to ease away. And as Venus and Jupiter reach a peak on the 12th, there could be a fated conversation which turns out to be truly fortunate. Also, from the 8th through to the 10th, although Mars is in an abrasive opposition with Saturn and Neptune, he actually forges a much more constructive one with Uranus, newly arrived in your second house of everyday money, and Pluto right at the top of your chart. If you're prepared to be flexible, a new professional or work-based opportunity could evolve across those days, and that power of communication that you're going to possess through week 2 will definitely give you an added dimension in order of how you express your ideas and come across to others. The 22nd, however, sees the Sun move into your sister Earth sign of Virgo. Ordinarily, at this time of year, this is a chance to feel more outgoing, more interactive, more sociable, and you could feel that this year, but with Uranus squaring off to the Sun, but also the new moon on the 23rd, don't be too quick to splash the cash. There may be something that you're drawn to of a speculative nature. Maybe it's an idea that a friend tells you about. Maybe it's that new get rich or side hustle concept. But again, don't be too rash at this point. There may be even someone that you find very captivating romantically, and you could find yourself being a lot more impulsive. But your ruler moves on the 25th into a part of your chart which really is about nurturing your home and inner parts of your world. So the more tender part of relationships, connection with family members, or even making some physical changes decoratively to your abode could feature towards the end of the month. But in a social or romantic context, however much you find someone very interesting or attractive to be around, do let your inner senses guide you of whether you feel comfortable with that person. That's going to be very important. But there may be someone who offers something towards the end of this month. It may be around a property matter, and as much as it may seem very alluring, do make sure that once again you don't rush, but also do your careful research. With year 2025 absolutely racing by, you can order your year 2026 Natal Forecast now, and I'll give you the rest of this year free, but also 30% off and your life roadmap report. the most important document any of us can ever read, helping to give us searing insights into the life patterns that have played out so far, but a much more intimate understanding of how to work with those energies future forwards. Please see the link below for more. Welcome Gemini to your in-depth monthly forecast for August 2025. The chances are from the 9th through to the 15th you're going to have a significant opportunity. Now that opportunity could be to get together with people you're really comfortable with and enjoy really good food and wine. Or it could mean that you are going to have a slice of financial serendipity. But the key to progress this month is actually being realistic, because although the two planets of fortune do combine at that point, and it could be very positive for you, as we begin this month, there is a clash to Venus, the planet of money, but also of self-worth, and obviously of relating, in the part of your situation to do with values. And there may actually be a discordant note between you and a friend as you come into August. And the key, therefore, is to use your communicational skills with great aplomb. And as you enter August, so your ruler is in a retrograde. Now, as we came to the end of July, there was a cazimi, but it was an inferior conjunction because of that Mercury retrograde. So rushing any important interactions, plans, discussions is not the way forwards. And yet there is a part of you that could be somehow or another rather frustrated as we come into August because of the role of Mars. Mars is clashing with Venus, but it's also broadly opposite both Saturn and Neptune. But it will be moving into a very constructive part of your chart on the 6th. For you, the 5th house is where you can be very much more outgoing, dynamic, even charismatic in the following 6 weeks. And Mars forges a hugely dynamic link to Uranus in your sign, but also Pluto in your sister air sign of Aquarius. So that air energy of Mars arriving in Libra can really help you to share your ideas with a great deal of conviction. What's not to like? Well, it's just that Mars goes exactly opposite Saturn and Neptune. And you could actually experience some real resistance. And with Mercury retrograde, therefore, someone, however much you try, may not receive the message as you mean. So care and not rushing things is important. Also, there is a full moon on the 9th, and it's a full moon in your sister air sign of Aquarius, which is emphasizing the 3rd, 9th axis in your situation. So you could find yourself discussing a contract, a travel plan, or having a discussion where your views don't marry with someone else that you're having that debate with. And that can create some frustration. But just know, from the 11th, Mercury goes direct. It won't necessarily be a complete panacea. It has been in retrograde since July the 18th, and it won't emerge from the post-retrograde shadow until the 25th of this month. But generally speaking, things should pick up. Ideas can be crisper. The exchange between people just seems to be that much more easy to have. But Mercury going direct in the sign of Leo is still a sign which is very much to do with where we attach our pride, if you like. So if you get too caught up on your ideas, the energy from the full moon, which is still cascading from the 9th for 2 weeks, could still cause some issues, not least because there is a T-square with Black Moon Lilith at that time. So whatever you're desiring and thinking about, 3rd, 9th house, or discussing, just be conscious of not rushing the process. But certainly from the 8th to the 10th, that glittering grand air trine between Uranus and your sign, which is pushing you to be more daring, to break free of any inhibitions that you've experienced in recent years with Uranus in your 12th house, Pluto in your ninth could see you thinking about travelling, higher education, sharing ideas to a wider audience. If you are interested in publishing in any shape or form, this can be a sensational time. And Mars in Libra is asking us all collectively to be much more conscious of the concept of fairness. But I think for you, one of the juggles you may have is if you do find yourself heading in a new bright direction, the Saturn-Neptune conjunction means that certain friendships you've had in the past could feel that they're not quite as relevant in your situation as they have been. But I feel that things will settle a little bit. You can have that stroke of serendipity from the 9th through to the 15th. But I have to say, if you have been on any kind of diet, you are going to find it very hard to stick to it across those days. If you are invited to any nice parties or gatherings where there's some lush food, that may be hard to resist. But on the 22nd, a really key day. Things slow down somewhat with the sun moving into the part of your situation to do with your home and emotional life, but it does clash with Uranus, newly arrived in your sign. If there has been some expectations around your family life that you've generally tended to be a very obliging around, you may find a much more rebellious part of your nature starts to come out. There could be some turbulence too on the new moon of the 23rd. Now that of course is a time to set our intentions. If you want to move, you want to improve, this is an important time. But if you're living in a situation which is too cramped, too big, too small, wrong environment, Uranus being in a square is going to see you take some potentially radical and fast action to change the status quo, and someone around you, someone close to you, may find that actually quite hard to keep up with. But on the 25th, if you do need to have a conversation with anyone and reassure people, Venus moving into the sign of Leo and into your third house will certainly help you to soothe and smooth. And also, if you have got ideas that you feel are very exciting, that's an opportunity at the end of this month to get those across in a very compelling way. But you may find yourself chatting to someone, perhaps online if you're single, as Venus reaches an exact opposition with Pluto as the celestial curtain comes down on this month, who you find very, very interesting, very intriguing indeed. But do you truly, or will you truly know what that person is about and what their motives are? The Pluto energy could see that somewhat hidden, or you may find that you have a meeting of minds with someone, or you're hugely attracted to someone and then find that their value system clashes bitterly with yours. But what do you do if you do find them so physically attractive that your pulse is racing, even if in another way they're a big turn off? That kind of thing is possible as this month draws to a close. So the potential for good fortune is definitely there this month. The potential to showcase brilliant ideas you've got is there, but also the potential for things to go awry by having too higher expectations, rushing the process, and also getting into conflict with people who see things in a different way. So patience will be important, but I think that crucial last 10 days of August could see you feeling more unsettled at home, or if you work in an environment which you don't really like, or the atmosphere is not very good with the people you're with, you're going to find yourself much more open to some kind of sudden liberating change than you have been for some time past. With year 2025 absolutely racing by, you can order your year 2026 Natal Forecast now, and I'll give you the rest of this year free, but also 30% off and your life roadmap report, the most important document any of us can ever read, helping to give us searing insights into the life patterns that have played out so far, but a much more intimate understanding of how to work with those energies future forwards. Please see the link below for more. Cancer, your August 2025 forecast begins with Venus, the planet of relating but also of money, having moved late in July into your own sign. What she can do for you this month is give you an opportunity through to the 25th to feel gorgeous, to feel that much more alluring, particularly when she merges with Jupiter exactly on the 12th. The two planets of fortune aligning, and that starts to build up from the 9th through to the 15th. And Venus in our own sign is a wonderful chance to perhaps revisit our personal appearance, perhaps look through your clothes and see if there are some refinements that you can make. But Venus is challenged at the very start of this month by the stern energies of Saturn. Saturn for you, along with Neptune, is in the part of your situation to do with your connection to the wider world. And in some ways, Venus's arrival and clash with Saturn and Neptune could be a little bit of a challenge in terms of how you feel about yourself. Someone older around you, perhaps a parent, could make a cutting comment or be a bit cool towards you. Maybe professionally, if you're developing something that's very creative and artistic, it can feel that whatever you do will never be enough. And because Mercury ended July in a conjunction with the Sun in the Cazimi and continues its retrograde through to the 11th, in the part of your chart to do with everyday money, self-worth and values, if you don't feel very recognised as you come into this month, it could be quite triggering for you, particularly as the moon starts the month in your sister water sign of Scorpio, squaring off with the Sun in Leo, and that can give you the desire to be a bit freer with your resources. But because of Mercury's retrograde, unless you have to buy something, I feel it's going to be important to micromanage the in and outgoings of your expenditure, particularly through the full moon of the 9th in the sign of Aquarius, which for you is shared resources, long-term financial planning. It's the give and take of that side of your chart. The second house, where the Sun and Mercury are, is everyday costs. Now, Mercury going direct on the 11th will surely help. But what also happens on the 6th is Mars, the planet of passion and assertion, moves out of the part of your chart to do with quick fire exchanges. And through July, Mars had been very supportive to you in terms of expressing your ideas. And if we go back to when the Sun moved into your sign on the 21st of June, Mars was there as a conduit, really helping you forwards. So Mars moving on the 6th into your 4th house could be a potentially challenging part of the month, because then he goes directly opposite Saturn and Neptune in that same area of expectations, and perhaps people in positions of authority or situations where you're expected to flex into the more standard way that things are done. But Mars moving into the 4th house is in a way a kind of indicative energy of how it could be if it was in your sign. It could be a little bit moody, perhaps a little up and down, but a bit more outspoken, but in a defensive way. So as Mars and Saturn particularly go face to face, if you feel that someone's expectations or thrust in their idea of how life and standards should be on you, you may find yourself pushing back in quite a powerful way. And because the dialogue could be about finances with that Mercury retrograde and the full moon, that may be the area. Or maybe the area is because you're with Venus's help and actually heads towards Jupiter, wanting to focus much more on what gives you a soul charge, what really inspires you, what brings your passion to life. And if your passion feels in any way diminuted, that may be something you become much more conscious of. And a big crunch point occurs because as much as Venus and Jupiter could bring some luck your way, and if you are single and you'd like to meet someone, don't be surprised if more than one person shows an interest in you at the heart of this month. But by the 22nd, things start to speed up. The sun moves into the sign of Virgo, which we know can be about service, it can be about details, it can be about virtue, it can be about organisation. But for you, the third house is very much how you think and how you articulate your ideas. It can be about beliefs, but there's an immediate clash with Uranus. And that clash with Uranus suggests that Uranus in your 12th house could see something that's been boiling away in the background for some while burst into the open. And if you do feel that someone has been over the top in their expectations, or rather stingy, unyielding, wanting it all on their terms, I feel this could unfortunately play out at work. You may find a much more rebellious part of your nature comes out, because you have a reputation, Cancer, of disliking confrontation. You'll go left, you'll go right, you'll bury under the sand to avoid an outright clash. But when you're really fired up, you need to remember that you are a cardinal sign, or one of the leader signs. So when Mars makes his way into the sign of Libra, does clash with Saturn and Neptune, he does by the 8th and the 10th actually forge a very strong link with Pluto, but also the newly arrived Uranus in the part of your chart to do with what's deeply buried within you. So there may be something very psychological that just boils up at the heart of this month, but you can surf it in a very constructive way by getting in touch with what your deeper personal purpose is. And if you do feel that that Saturn-Neptune alliance, which has been really quite difficult at times earlier in the month, you're going to shrug it off. You're going to have your opinion. You're going to be much more direct. You may find yourself even indulging in shock and awe by the time of the new moon of the 23rd, because that's also influenced by the electric energies of Uranus. Maybe something that you've been perhaps dealing with for some time, perhaps a psychological issue, maybe it's an old hurt, maybe it's something deep within you. It could be part of your shadow side that you're not totally conscious of, that something can boil up to the surface as this month draws to a close. But if you are focused much more on finances, although the Mercury retrograde and also the full moon can cause some complications this month, you could also have a fantastic stroke of fortune as August comes to a close, when on the 25th Venus moves into Leo. But there could also be someone you encounter as Venus goes face to face with Pluto as August ends, that you find so compelling, so alluring, someone with such a magnetic energy, you might find it almost impossible not to be drawn towards them. But do be conscious of the power dynamic between you. With year 2025 absolutely racing by, you can order your year 2026 Natal Forecast now, and I'll give you the rest of this year free, but also 30% off and your life roadmap report, the most important document any of us can ever read, helping to give us searing insights into the life patterns that have played out so far, but a much more intimate understanding of how to work with those energies future forwards. Please see the link below for more. So Leo, your August 2025 forecast suggests as you come into the month, you may have a particular plan that you want to apply and really have invested a lot of mental energy and enthusiasm too. But I'm just suggesting that things might not go exactly to plan. Now I hope they do, but if they don't, do try to be philosophical about it, because sometimes in life, and particularly with Mercury retrogrades, when things do get blocked or snared, it's so frustrating and irritating. But actually in the fullness of time, we understand much more deeply that what eventually ensues is actually right for us. And I want to take you back to the third week of June, because that's when the Sun joined up with Jupiter in a very psychological part of your chart, but also clashed immediately with Saturn and Neptune in the part of your situation to do with truths, higher truths. But you may have become more conscious of something from your past at that time. Your past history may be even someone you used to be involved with. Now, when the Sun made his way into your sign on July the 22nd, that enabled you to come more into the present. Obviously very good. You're a fire sign. You want to create and you want to make things happen. You're passionate. But as July came to a close, not only was there a Mercury cazimi, which was an inferior conjunction because of Mercury's retrograde, suggesting some kind of rethinking or delay, but also Venus moved into Cancer, the exact same position that you had on the 21st of June is repeated, but this time the planet of relating, but also of money. You could have a very profound memory at the very start of this month, and it could be to do with your emotional life going back many, many years. And part of it might be to do with your family, because there's a quarter moon on the first day of this month, the Sun in your sign squaring off with the moon in the very deeply emotional Scorpio. Scorpio can be where we hold on to things, sometimes where we can be attached to things that aren't good for us, like grudges. But I feel the combination of Venus in your 12th house, which is very, very profound in terms of understanding our deeper needs, connections and emotions, and the moon in your 4th house of home, family and where you live, competing, if you like, with, in the case of Venus, the fire energy of Saturn and Neptune in Aries, and in the case of the moon, the fire energy of the Sun. So whatever desire you have to make rapid progress at the start of this month, I don't necessarily think it's going to happen. Also on the 6th, Mars, the planet of action, desire, assertion, ego, which has been in the part of your scope, helping you to be very proactive in terms of getting the foundations of your world firmer, and indeed everyday finances. That goes face to face with the position of Saturn and Neptune. If you're traveling anywhere over those group of days, whatever you do, don't try to force the pace. I don't feel that you're going to have an accident necessarily, but I don't feel that you'll have a particularly enjoyable journey if you try to time yourself. It's best really to, just go along within your energies and enjoy things. If you can go the scenic route, if you are traveling anywhere long distance, absolutely vital that you really triple check all the documentation, make sure that all your paperwork and jabs and all the rest of it are all up to scratch. But even if you're wanting to discuss something that you feel very strongly about, again, there may be resistance. It might not go quite as quickly as you would like. And that very psychological energy of Venus could be stirring up things so deep down within your emotions. Something, as I mentioned before, that's very historic could come up. You may even find yourself searching online for someone, having a conversation and not reacting in quite the way you ordinarily would. You do like to maintain a presence. It's very important for Leos to be respected. Of course you like to be liked, you love to be loved, you adore to be adored, but you do need to be respected. That's your minimum requirement. And because of the Aquarius full moon on the 9th, it's possible that someone's going to be more outspoken to you about what they see as your weaknesses. And one of the weaknesses they may highlight is your preoccupation with what's important for you, rather than being more conscious of what's important for a group of people, or perhaps your friends. There's also a T-square to Black Moon Lilith on that particular event, again, like the moon at the start of the month, in the deep psychological and sometimes hard to resist energies of Scorpio. So a clash is possible in these early parts of the month because of the intensity that Mars will create. Mars is not at its best in Libra, but I feel because of the current circumstances going on, where there are a lot of polarized viewpoints in the world. And Uranus, if you recall last month on the 7th, moved into a very electric part of your chart for friendships. As Mars inches forwards away from the direct opposition to Saturn and Neptune, he starts to come into contact with Pluto and Uranus in a superb way for you. And then on the 11th, Mercury goes direct. So whatever has been stuck can start to move, but I feel your plan may have evolved. And I think you'll be okay about it, to be honest. But I think what's going to surprise you most of all, how that issue or person or situation that you encountered in your past, or something where you don't feel fully supported by people in your present in a more emotional way, can really come up to the boil as Venus and Jupiter meet in a conjunction exactly on the 12th. You could enjoy a huge connection with someone from your past that's very healing. Venus can be about peace. Jupiter can be about luck. Jupiter in Cancer, of course, is about the emotional dimension, but is exalted. Jupiter is also about faith. It would be a very positive time, not necessarily to think in a material context, but to think in terms of releasing something that's been stuck deep within you for a very long time that's actually not working for you. It could be that you're holding on to something. It may be necessary for your benefit to forgive and let go. But as you do, the freedom that that's going to generate for you can be absolutely fantastic. And that frees you up to move into the moment in a much more dynamic way. Now, with the Sun moving into the practical Virgo on the 22nd, part of your chart to do with the ins and outgoings of everyday finance, but also where you want to get the foundational elements of your life firm. Remember, Mars was there through to the 6th. Something that you were working on then can recommence, or something that you were working on creatively at the start of this month, which didn't go quite as quickly as you would like because of the retrograde, that can start to gain traction. But also it could be challenged, because if you are working in an environment which is dull, repetitive, there's not much acknowledgement for the application and dedication you show. If you're someone who wants to bring a new financial reality to your life, but also creates more flexibility in how you earn a living, I feel the square between Uranus and the new moon, which occurs on the 23rd, is really significant. But then something else happens just as we get to the end of the month, because Venus moves into your sign. And the soul searching that you will likely do with Venus in the 12th house about that past situation, that past relationship, that past loss, the person you're not quite sure of in the present, something to do with sincerity or a lack of loyalty, you're going to really have it all worked out by the time Venus moves into your sign on the 25th. But she goes face to face with Pluto at the end of this month. And you're going to have an opportunity to test out how you have released yourself from an old way of thinking about relationships, an old blockage, an old inhibition, some self-limiting thinking about your self-worth. You're going to feel so gorgeous at the end of this month. Yes, even more gorgeous, Leo. And someone is going to find that very, very tempting. Now, your gorgeousness could come through your sheer talents, or it could come from your personal magnetism and charisma, a very strong part of Leo's nature. But Pluto does provide a potential challenge, because someone may test out if you're being as sincere as they want you to be. So as much as you may emerge and feel, oh, I've got through that Venus transit, through the complex 12th house, fantastic, I've done all this inner work, and then someone's going to come along and test out just how robust that healing has been. Or if you have separated from someone, there could be the chance to go on a new date, perhaps even the chance of a rapprochement with that person. And that's when you're going to find out just the progress that's truly been made. But the most important thing this month, I feel, is to understand your fixed nature. With the fixed energy of the position of the Sun and Mercury at the start of this month, and the quarter moon in Scorpio, and the fixed energy of the Aquarius full moon, flexing is going to be crucial. So understanding it's not actually the journey so much that's going to be just the key, because the journey is likely to be somewhat disrupted in terms of the spiritual dimension. It is going to be the arrival that's so important, and that arrival could see you achieve a significant breakthrough in terms of how you feel about yourself, how available you feel to connect to others. And even if you're not looking for a relationship, whatever you shift inside of you will see the world change towards you in the most lovely of ways. With year 2025 absolutely racing by, you can order your year 2026 Natal Forecast now, and I'll give you the rest of this year free, but also 30% off and your Life Roadmap Report. The most important document any of us can ever read, helping to give us searing insights into the life patterns that have played out so far, but a much more intimate understanding of how to work with those energies future forwards. Please see the link below for more. So Virgo, your August 2025 forecast begins with the Sun and your ruler Mercury in your tender 12th house. The 12th house is about reflection. Everybody has a period of reflection each year, and it's the 4 weeks before our Sun returns to our sign. But Mercury being in the mix and being retrograde as August begins adds an extra layer of complexity. But Venus, the relator, moved as July came to a close into your sector of friendship, asking you to celebrate the things you have in common with people, not the things that make you different. And yet, as you come into this month, there is a quarter moon between the 12th house Sun and the 3rd house and deep and passionate moon in Scorpio. So there could be some gossip to the fore as you enter August, or you could be feeling lower in vitality or lower in confidence. You may even feel a bit isolated. Psychologically, you may feel the world's going on around you and you're not part of it. And if there is a friend that tends to be very possessive, controlling, not necessarily as open-hearted as you would like, that fair weather friendship could be teased into the open as you enter this month, all of which is hugely frustrating because you start this month with Mars still in your sign, and Mars is very much about action in things and can be very exciting and can be very dynamic, but is also opposite Saturn and Neptune broadly. On the 6th, Mars moves out of your sign and into the sign of Libra. Technically debilitated, but for you, this is where you're going to be thinking for 6 weeks about everyday finance, but also about your self-worth. Mars is pushing you to take your value seriously. Saturn and Neptune is where you're connecting to others who may be only too keen to tell you of your lack of value. So it's possible as you come into this month that you're feeling somewhat deflated or unsure about what other people's intentions and motives really are. But I want to reassure you, because there is going to be one or maybe more than one friends who really demonstrate to you just how much they value you. And also, when the Sun returns to your sign on the 22nd and you have the new moon in your sign on the 23rd, those are both opportunities for you to move into the moment, take firmer control of your life direction and get on the front foot. But we do need to go back to that Mars transition into Libra. Libra is the sign of fairness. If you feel a financial matter isn't being conducted in a particularly even-handed way, you may find yourself getting very, very exasperated. And particularly by the full moon of the 9th, because once again, if you feel that someone is trying to undermine you by not focusing on the gifts you have, which is organisation, attention to detail, being available to support others, in a world that sees service as somehow beneath us, you understand the value and the glue that provides for society to do things to help others, whether it's through food, whether it's through healing, whether it's through health, whatever. But once Mercury goes direct on the 11th, things will ease. It's not going to be a panacea. It won't be until the 25th when Mercury emerges from its post-retrograde shadow that you'll get the true release. But what you do get from the 9th to the 15th is a surprising feed of information. And there could be one friend who you have been unsure of, or it could be someone new who you really can bond with in a very positive way from the 9th through to the 15th. In fact, that peaks on the 12th, the conjunction between Venus and Jupiter. Now, if you're someone who tends to take part in some kind of collaborative effort, where you get together a group of people, maybe you'll put some money in for some kind of draw prize each week or each month, there could be some serendipity linked to something like that. But also just connecting to the person who really gets you without you having to justify yourself, without it being about money, without someone being a bit snarky about your work situation or the something that they perceive as not being quite as good as it could, when actually it could be even a little bit of jealousy and perhaps even just backbiting, because that's what can happen, sadly. But from the 23rd through to the 27th, Uranus newly arrived in Gemini last month, which is going to link very dynamically, I should say, to Mars and Pluto through the 8th to the 10th, suggests that some kind of professional opportunity could start to break for you. So if you have been putting up with a situation where you don't like the people you work with, you don't like the employers, you don't like the job, you feel undermined, it's affecting your physical vitality, but also your emotional happiness, you get a chance on the 22nd, as the sun moves into your sign, to really take charge and be much more assertive about how this will play out. The new moon asks you to set your intentions about your unique talents. But the key is, Virgo, you may need to break free of something you've done for quite some time that you're very good at, that you have a real appreciation of. And that may be a routine or structure that gives you a sense of identity, but also gives you a life pattern which makes you feel at ease. And if you think about it, Pluto's been pushing you in 3 stages to become more aware of what may need to evolve in terms of your everyday penchant for a metronomic approach to life. So with Uranus in the mix, in the most visible part of your situation, clashing with the part of you that's very much your individual nature, there could be some kind of change that's imposed upon you at work that you're not necessarily wanting, but it could be very liberating. But equally, there could be something you decide to do which breaks the paradigm by getting off some kind of role or situation which has no longer or is no longer serving your greater good. But Venus moves into your 12th house as this month draws to a close. And it's important to know that with the position of Mercury still being in your 12th house too, maybe is a relationship from your past or some deep thinking about a current one is something you need to consider too, especially if you're wanting to be more dynamic as August comes to a close and you don't feel your partner or your friends are particularly celebrating the thing that you want to be more daring around. But you have a chance. So this month could be potentially quite tricky at the very start of the month, but don't underestimate the upside that can come from Venus's conjunction, the 2 planets of fortune, through the 9th to the 15th, peaking on the 12th, but also becoming much more conscious of what the deeper part of your nature really is craving. And that's what that Mercury retrograde in your 12th house is asking you to review. And the energy of Mars, Uranus and Pluto are pushing you provoking you to be open to a fresh new beginning, which really helps to inspire you and helps you to demonstrate your wonderful skills, talents and experiences, but in a fresh and much more exciting and dynamic way. With year 2025 absolutely racing by, you can order your year 2026 Natal Forecast now, and I'll give you the rest of this year free, but also 30% off and your Life Roadmap Report, the most important document any of us can ever read, helping to give us searing insights into the life patterns that have played out so far, but a much more intimate understanding of how to work with those energies future forwards. Please see the link below for more. Welcome Libra to your August 2025 forecast. As you make your way into this month, Venus, your lovely ruler, has moved right to the top of your solar horoscope onto the 10th house cusp. This is where you can use your natural ability to relate to people, to work interactively with influential people, particularly around your goals and ambitions. So the delicacy that you have can be such an asset, but particularly as this month goes on. Because the intriguing thing, Libra, is that initially, right at the start of August, even if you do make overtures about a job or put forwards a proposal, or you have an important discussion with a decision maker, you may not actually get the green light in quite the way you want. And that could prove to be somewhat concerning, but also frustrating. Just know that also at the end of July, Mercury, the planet of communication, which is in the part of your situation to do with your long-term hopes, your friendships, your network, but also your higher principles, is in retrograde and is emerging from a cazimi. So something really notable about a communication may have occurred at the turn of the months, but because Saturn and Neptune are squaring up to Venus right at the start of this month and are broadly opposite the thrusting energy of Mars in a very psychological part of your chart through to the 6th when he joins your sign, you could find yourself being a little bit pessimistic about how your normal way of approaching things, which can often bring results, might not seem to be working, but don't buy into it too much. For sure, when Mars moves into your sign on the 6th, technically detrimented, but he's with you for 6 long weeks. And during that time, you're going to feel an improvement in your physical vitality. You're going to be more assertive. You're going to find yourself having a much greater desire to actualize your individuality. But he too, just like Venus, is blocked off by Saturn and Neptune. So again, there may be someone who seems to want to inhibit you, put some kind of obstacle in your path, which could prove to be phenomenally frustrating. But just be aware that soon after that, Mars starts to forge a grand air trine, but it's a hugely dynamic, energized one. Mars is of course about thrust, and it can be about, in our own sign, about taking direct action in a very decisive way. But Mars links to Pluto, the planet of change, in your sister air sign of Aquarius, which is about demonstrating your personal charisma and flair. And Uranus, newly arrived last month, in a much more independent and venturous part of your chart, brilliant for any kind of new start or innovation. That's forging the electricity charge, the drive of Mars, and back to Pluto, so the trine between them can be so productive for you, and things can really start to move. The full moon of the 9th is also in the sign of Aquarius. Now, full moons can of course be challenging, and over the next couple of weeks, if you are a little bit too pivoted towards what people think about you rather than what you should be focusing on for yourself, you're being asked to realign. But Mercury going direct on the 11th is going to ease the logjam. It's not going to be a complete solution. That will occur by August the 25th, when Mercury emerges from its post-retrograde shadow. In fact, from the middle of July last month when the retrograde began, and furthermore from around the 6th of July when the retrograde shadow began, you may have felt that that long-term plan seemed somewhat elusive, but it is coming towards you, and the evidence will be shown in a sensational way, potentially, between the 9th and the 15th, because then Venus, your ruler, aligns with Jupiter. So the lesser benefit aligns with the greater benefit, but in the part of your chart that's right in the most visible and goal-orientated part of your chart. So that natural ability you have to connect to people is just going to start to work. People are going to become much more conscious that some of your dazzling and perhaps futuristic ideas make real sense, but also you have the people skills to align and collaborate in the way that some other people don't usually possess. But the month does throw up a potential challenge when on the 22nd the Sun moves to replace Mars in your 12th house. Now every year for each zodiac sign, when the Sun reaches the point in the sign before our sign of coming into that sign, that starts the 12th house transit. But this year the Sun in Virgo, which of course is about purity, it can be about healing, can be about rest, recuperation, doing some reflection, perhaps having some moments to embrace some escapism in some ways, meditation, some treatments, spa days, all those kind of good things. Well, this year, for the first time, for about 77 years, the Sun is squaring with Uranus through these two signs. So what's really important here is that if something isn't quite working for you, it could seem to you to be amplified if you let it. So if there is a part of your nature that can be a little anxious, a little worrisome, but particularly about your professional situation, just have confidence in how this will play out, because the new moon on the 23rd is asking you to become much more conscious of what your deeper motives are. But Uranus could have a tendency of pushing some sensitive issues into the open. Well, the best way to deal with that is to embrace those sensitive issues ourselves. If we're not judging some of our concerns, some of our vulnerabilities, there's much less likelihood other people are going to judge them too. So it's a chance really to use some new thinking in terms of your deeper healing and perhaps shadow side of your nature. But on the 25th, you have a superb opportunity because Venus replaces the Sun in the sign of Leo. And Venus, your ruler, loves being in Leo. This is where she can be flamboyant. She can attract in a very charismatic way. Your ability to relate to people is going to be heightened enormously. And having the Sun in your 12th house just suggests that the way you do this can be subtle as well as more obviously. So that can be making connections to people in a non-obvious way. It could be connections to people from your past. It may be that there are some friends who are going to take some soundings for you, which can be very helpful as far as your career goals are concerned. But also remember that despite the fact the Sun and the new moon are in the tender 12th house, you still possess Mars in your own sign, and Mercury is travelling forwards, coming out of the shadow in the part of your chart to do with your alliances. So what you could find towards the end of this month is there is a division. There may be some people who show up as being much more fair weather friends, but there will be other people that you realise are going to be a major part of your future and in a very exciting, hugely exciting way. So whether it's professionally or socially, I feel by the end of this month you'll be much more on course of where you want to be with the right people, even if at the very start of this month your efforts may seem to fall a little bit short, but it's not really because of you, it's more the planetary environment. With year 2025 absolutely racing by, you can order your year 2026 Natal Forecast now, and I'll give you the rest of this year free, but also 30% off and your Life Roadmap Report. The most important document any of us can ever read, helping to give us searing insights into the life patterns that have played out so far, but a much more intimate understanding of how to work with those energies future forwards. Please see the link below for more. So Scorpio, your August 2025 forecast is going to see Saturn and Neptune very influential. But just to say, Saturn will be right at the end of this month preparing to inverse back into the sign of Pisces, which for you has mixed blessings. Saturn in the 5th solar house is not really a bunch of laughs, but all the hard work you've been putting in over the last couple of years in terms of your creative talents, you may need to go through one final period of pushing forwards to get them over the line, but you will get the results in mid-February next year. But what this month requires you to do with Saturn's help is grapple with the details. And sometimes the details can be a little bit frustrating. And because Neptune's in the mix as well, Neptune can distort, but for you, they're in your 6th house in a conjunction. So vitality could be affected by that. Also, your traditional ruler of Mars is going to move into a very tender part of your chart on the 6th and will initially come into a challenging opposition with Saturn and Neptune. So around your energy, that could take a little bit of a dip at that juncture. But also as July came to a close, the relator Venus moved into a part of your chart to do with travel, anything to do with culture, being more expressive, but clashes as we come into this month with the miserly duo of Saturn and Neptune. So around a romantic relationship, if you aren't feeling particularly happy, or you feel someone is not really contributing enough, perhaps on the domestic level, it could be a flatmate, it could be a family member, that could be a little bit of a niggle, particularly as the sun, right at the heart of our existences, is actually pushing you at the start of this month to actually raise your profile, work very hard in achieving greater recognition. And Mercury, the communicator, is alongside. Now they did crest together exactly as July came to a close, but Mercury is retrograde through to the 11th, so you could come into this month seeing your work situation as an opportunity, but not necessarily producing as you expect, and that Saturn and Neptune conjunction making you more aware of snags, limitations, or perhaps even where you don't feel you're quite as good as you could be. So do watch the self-criticism this month. I don't feel it will be particularly helpful to you. And around that work situation, or around any ambition you have, yes, it's true, at the start of this month, there may be something you need to alter. Mercury is about thinking, it's about communication, it's about messages, it's the intermediary, but it's also about analysis. But in the 10th house, it can suggest things, particularly in a retrograde, like retraining. It may be that you're going to have to flex. Not easy with you being a fixed sign and the Sun and Mercury in a fixed sign energy too, but that flexing could seize open an opportunity that some kind of delay or slowness seems to prevent you from going for what you had previously thought was what you wanted. So if you do get the chance to, for example, pitch for a job that's in a slightly different field or sector, but using your life experiences in a fresh way, do be very open to it, Scorpio. Because once we get to the 6th and Mars, your traditional ruler, goes into your 12th house, that could be a potentially tricky period for you that begins through the next 6 weeks, because Mars goes immediately opposite, as I mentioned before, Saturn and Neptune. Your physical vitality, particularly if you have got a lot on in terms of demands professionally, could be quite low at this time. The full moon on the 9th could make you much more aware of where you might want to cocoon yourself away. If your professional situation is very heavy, maybe your work-life balance is just out of kilter. But I return to the early point about Saturn and Neptune being in the 6th house. The 6th house can be to do with things like chores, routines, and if someone isn't pulling their weight, or perhaps you could be a bit more organised, that could liberate you to get that better balance. So if you do need to be a bit firmer with some people around you, do take the opportunity to be so. But you know, within a couple of days, Mars inches forwards and connects to your modern ruler of Pluto. And in turn, that connects back to Uranus. Uranus has moved into a part of your chart which does have an echo of the sign of Scorpio. The 8th house can be transitions. It can be where we become much more conscious of our devotions, of our deep commitments, but it can also be about long-term finances. And in a way, because Uranus asks us to look at things in a fresh, sometimes innovative way, you could find that if you're thinking about a property matter, but think about it deeply and perhaps do some very extensive research, an opportunity can get prized open that when Mercury goes direct on the 11th, it will be in post-retrograde shadow, it's true, to the 25th, but I feel you'll feel much more comfortable if you do need to do something in a different way. So there could be a little bit of a roadblock at the start of this month. If there's too much at home that you have to deal with, you're having to support others, you've got obligations, those could be inhibiting about your desire to break out and do something more varied, particularly culturally or to do with travel with Venus. And with the opposition between Saturn and Neptune and Mars on the 6th, maybe if you are feeling lower in vitality, that's also shown up. But the month also gives you the astrological tools to make some amendments and change things. And then if you stick with it from the 9th to the 15th, if you are travelling anywhere, with Venus coming into an exact gorgeous conjunction with Jupiter, you could have an absolutely wonderful time. Whether it's to do with business, work, a job application, whether your job is to do with travel, whether it is someone you connect to who comes from a different background, that connection or opportunity could be very positive indeed. And then the Sun replaces Mars, your ruler, in the bubbly 11th house. The 11th house is our connections to others. It can be friendships, can be our network, can be our long-term plan, and there is a new moon on the 23rd where you can set your intentions using those connections in a really positive way. Just be conscious, however, that for the first time in nearly 80 years, Uranus, the planet of electricity, sudden changes, does clash with that new moon position. If there is a friend around you who tends to be a little clingy, perhaps resist some of the things you're wanting to do fresh, maybe you feel is also a bit controlling, you might find yourself wanting to have some space. It might not be terminal, but just know with Venus moving to the top of your chart on the 25th, if that professional opportunity that didn't quite move at the speed of light at the start of the month, if it's still open to you, your skills as a negotiator or working with people, which can often be very, very shrewd, are certainly going to come to the fore. People will be conscious of your ability to network, the 11th house energy of the Sun and the new moon, but also your neat personality power, particularly if you're a creative, can be very constructive. You could, in a relationship context, Also, if you've met someone you really like and you want to take it to the next step of commitment, you could find yourself meeting their folks as Venus moves to the top of your chart. Or if you've been with someone for a longer period of time, it could be a moment, if things are working generally well with you, when you're considering perhaps a property matter between you. But as August comes to a complete close, Venus does go into an opposition with your modern ruler Pluto. Just be aware that if you do encounter someone who's very keen for you to work with them and is very enthusiastic and very personable themselves, and perhaps they have a talent for understanding your emotional motives, that person could prise open and present an opportunity which seems very hard to resist. And it could be a very, very good opportunity. But also just be aware when Venus and Pluto are in opposition that something that seems too good to be true may be too good to be true, because someone could have a motive, but a motive that can be hidden. Pluto. Now, you're someone with a great strategic understanding, but I think generally this month you are being asked to be very open and upfront about what you need. It could be that other people will be upfront and open with what they want from you, but you will need to manage your energy carefully so you don't dissipate what's really important by getting too bogged down in the details or in the chores. And then as the month goes on, you will have an opportunity to be much more playful, joyful and social too. With year 2025 absolutely racing by, you can order your year 2026 Natal Forecast now, and I'll give you the rest of this year free, but also 30% off and your Life Roadmap Report, the most important document any of us can ever read, helping to give us searing insights into the life patterns that have played out so far, but a much more intimate understanding of how to work with those energies future forwards. Please see the link below for more. Sagittarius, your August 2025 forecast begins with Venus, the planet of relating but also of money, having moved into a very deep, intense part of your scope, but clashing with the restrictive but also dissolving energies of Saturn and Neptune. So as you start this month, if you're not quite feeling it around an emotional or romantic relationship, there could be a lot of thinking about what to do. And the planet of thought, Mercury, is in a retrograde alongside the Sun, emerging from a cazimi at the end of July, which could see you thinking a lot about personal space, about having a little bit more time to yourself. If you are someone who loves travelling, that also could be an area that you're contemplating, because Mercury retrogrades are opportunities. Yes, they can create delays. You may be discussing a contract. There may be something that you need to receive some professional help on in terms of understanding. But Mars recently, over the previous 5 weeks as we enter August, has actually been in a very authoritative part of your chart, giving you a lot of extra confidence to raise your profile. But he clashes with Saturn and Neptune too, exactly from the 6th, when he moves into a part of your chart for 6 weeks, which is much more to do with your alliances, your long-term plan, but also your network. So I felt that what the early parts of this month can show up is where you're not particularly feeling a sense of passion, and maybe you're wanting to flex and change things to create a little bit more of an opportunity to reflect on what your options are. Now later in the month, as Venus escapes the grip of Saturn and Neptune, she is actually going to align in the most beautiful of ways with Jupiter, your ruler. And if you're lucky enough to be in a relationship which is going super well, the chances are you and your partner will do something more spontaneous through the start of this month, which could see you jetting off somewhere last minute, or perhaps taking a day trip out, or just deciding to do something off the cuff together, which could give you the opportunity to spend some quality time together. But if you are someone who wants to make progress in terms of your financial situation, your ability to understand the subtleties in situations are also going to be highlighted from the 9th to the 15th. And maybe is the full moon of the 9th is going to also see you looking or researching a lot, discussing a lot. You could hear varying viewpoints, but they can all be very informative to you. But as Mars moves past the exact opposition to the restraining energies of Saturn and the lowering of vitality energies of Neptune, he then forges a stunning grand air trine to Pluto in the part of your chart to do with everyday communications, and Uranus, newly arrived, in the part of your chart to do with fresh connections. So you may find yourself having some very exciting conversations from the heart of the month. Maybe they will be to do with business. With Mercury going direct on the 11th, that just helps things speed up, blockages be cleared. But that combination between Venus and Jupiter could, in a very close emotional or intimate relationship, give you an opportunity to do something that you don't necessarily find easy to do, which is to get very close. If, however, you're wanting to work more with someone in terms of a business situation, your ability to see the big picture, make bold moves, have the confidence to go for it, is also going to be something to behold. Now, for some archers, you may receive very good news that's related to someone else. So it could be a partner is going to hear about an insurance, a pension, a legacy payment. There could be something to do with an inheritance that also comes to pass around about the 12th of this month. All truly exciting stuff. But then on the 22nd, the Sun replaces the strident Mars in the most authoritative and visible part of your chart, your sector of goals, followed by a new moon on the 6th. But they're going to square up to Uranus. So if you are in a situation in terms of your work where you don't really feel particularly seen or heard or recognised, and you are feeling restless, one of the areas of change that could show up this month could be around that area. And there may be someone who you're connecting with who just seems to spur you on. It's their enthusiasm, their freshness, their sense of excitement, which you're really feeding into. Or if you want to work for yourself, you may decide to start a new enterprise that has some very fresh ways of going about things. Your ability as a communicator, however, is emphasized furthermore on the 25th when Venus moves to replace the Sun in the sign of Leo. And if you do need to, or you are looking to travel somewhere towards the end of this month, it could be a very immersive experience. You could also have a conversation with someone as August comes to a close that really is quite spellbinding. It could have a karmic potential. You may encounter someone that you feel you've met before. There's something about them that just chimes, that you just feel very easy with one another. Or it could be a blinding connection which is more physical, where you just find someone very, very hard to ignore. So this is a month which could see you thinking, discussing, travelling, perhaps rescheduling, finding out about a contractual matter, gaining some extra insights from information you receive due to the full moon on the 9th. But I feel Mars moving into your 11th house gives you the opportunity to use your leadership skills, but in a more collaborative way. But initially, if you do feel that you're not sensing excitement, passion, enthusiasm at the start of this month, it wouldn't really be a surprise. And I think it's going to be from the start of week 2 that you really start to feel that you're flowing forwards, and by the end of week 2 things will be rattling along at a much more encouraging pace. With year 2025 absolutely racing by, you can order your year 2026. Natal Forecast now, and I'll give you the rest of this year free, but also 30% off and your Life Roadmap Report, the most important document any of us can ever read, helping to give us searing insights into the life patterns that have played out so far, but a much more intimate understanding of how to work with those energies future forwards. Please see the link below for more. Welcome Capricorn to your August 2025 forecast. Your ruler Saturn gives you an innate appreciation of hard work, discipline, knowing exactly what your limitations are. But it has, since the end of May, been inhabiting a very tender part of your chart, along with the mystical energies of Neptune, which arrived at the end of March. That combination is going to be very close together through the back of the spine of this month. On the 1st of September, Saturn is going to invert back into your third house. It's going to come back into your sector of home, emotion, family, your environment, deeper feelings in February next year. But what it does do at the start of this month is ask you some questions about your connections to others. Now, those connections don't have to be romantic, because Venus, the planet of relating, has moved into a divine part of its journey through your chart at the end of July. And in fact, through the 9th to the 15th of this month, peaking on the 12th, forges one of astrology's most fortunate alliances. And you could connect with someone at that time in a magical way. Again, doesn't have to be primarily romantic. But right at the start of this month, Venus is at right angles to Saturn and Neptune. If you don't feel very heard in a more sensitive way by someone you're close to, or they don't feel very heard by you, it could create a pinch point. And what makes things potentially more complex is that Mercury, the communicator, enters this month in retrograde. It goes direct on the 11th, but is in a part of your chart to do with the deeper connection to people. The 8th house is about devotions, but it can also be about shared resources, finances, and so forth. So if you're trying to discuss something and the diplomacy of Venus is what you're pushing forwards with, it may be that people don't feel the warmth from you that you're meaning because of the more inhibiting or confusing energies of Saturn and Neptune. And what adds another detail to the mix at the start of this month is that Mars, the planet of risk, has been in a very flamboyant part of your chart for the 5 weeks preceding this month. And by the 6th of this month, goes face to face with your ruler, Saturn, and also with Neptune. So if you get frustrated with a situation, because Mars moving into the 10th house for you is a wonderful opportunity over the following 6 weeks to raise your profile, be more decisive, show your leadership skills, but also be more authoritative. But if you push too hard, something could break down. It may be around a family relationship. It's possible that there is some kind of shift going on in who holds or seems to hold the authority. When changes happen in quite subtle but powerful ways, where there has been a particular way of doing things, and then that starts to alter because we're all evolving. In any group dynamic, that can actually cause some concern for the person who feels they're losing some of their authority and someone else is challenging their authority. So some of these issues can play out at the start of this month. The full moon on the 9th is in the sign of Aquarius, where Pluto, the planet of transformation, is. But that is also in a T-square with Black Moon Lilith in the part of your chart to do with your desires around, say, friendships, the 11th house. So for you, if your connection to someone isn't quite working as far as friendship is concerned, or you feel that someone takes your generosity, your money, your possessions somewhat for granted. So it could be someone that comes round to your home quite frequently, may make something to eat, may just have a very informal way of being. That could be something that really jars for you. When Mercury goes direct, it can release some of the tension, but there is a big opportunity here if you are wanting to reset how you earn money. And the full moon, therefore, could be very constructive for you, along with Mars moving to the top of your chart, because if you are wanting to try something different in terms of generating income, the fact that Mars links to Pluto in Aquarius in your second house, everyday money, on the back of that full moon, but also links to the newly arrived Uranus, pushing you to change some of your daily routines, do things in a different way. If you go for a new job using the innovation of Uranus, the confidence of Mars, and the canniness, and you're often a very canny person, of Pluto, you could set something future forwards which actually works really well and reach an accord with someone that just is lovely. So I feel the key with coping at the start of this month is if you are feeling a lot of resistance, you feel something shifting around the politics of a relationship, professionally, in the family, perhaps in a relationship, it's going to require some care not to get too defensive, or not to try and boss it and control it too much. Let it flow. People need to express whatever frustrations they're feeling. Because one of the things that Saturn in the fourth house is encouraging you to do is to be more honest about some of your vulnerabilities. And if you try to crush that within yourself as Mars goes opposite Saturn, that's actually not going to be good for you. If you project a powerful image in order to protect your vulnerabilities, that may be something that gives you an instant win, but you could lose something for the longer term. So the best way to proceed this month is to try to invest a little bit of goodwill in others, a little bit of trust, and that's not easy to do when Saturn and Neptune are in a conjunction in the fourth house. You might not get everything you want. You might have to be a bit firmer about your boundaries. Why not? But if you're not overbearing about this reset, it can be very good for you. And then that beautiful, beautiful link between Venus and Jupiter. Jupiter, of course, is exalted in Cancer, and Venus has escaped the early restriction of Saturn and Neptune in the month. So something can really develop in a very lovely way. But if you're really not satisfied by how things are going, and you feel that you do want to march to the door marked exit because you don't feel you can unpick something that's not satisfactory, the Sun's arrival in Virgo on the 22nd, followed by the new moon of the 23rd, could see you decide to do something quite radical. It could even be around a job, you know. There is that part of you that does perhaps like what's familiar, but you are a cardinal sign, and when something's not working and you have the confidence to change it, you are incredibly effective in taking a step forwards. And Mars is giving you extra confidence towards the end of the month, the Sun and the new moon pushing you to be more experimental, but also break free to reset your independent spirit, but they're also clashing with Uranus. So the change you go through could disrupt something that has worked for a very long time. And it's really like the chaos theory, or sometimes when people use the analogy, you can't make an omelette unless you break the eggs. So something could break down a little bit at the end of this month, but through the change, something new and exciting and dazzling can start to shape up for you. And if you have kept your cool and seen that you can link with someone collaboratively this month, if you talk through some of the differences you might have, or understand more where each of you comes from, as Venus moves to dive deep on the 25th, you could get a really lovely, deep, intimate connection romantically, or there could be some financial gift that comes to you towards the end of this month that's very much linked through collaboration or connection. So it might not actually be you or your situation, it could be someone else's generosity to you. So earlier in the month, other people perhaps taking your possessions or goodwill for granted could really be something that jars. But it all depends on your unique situation, because when Saturn squares up with Venus, if there is a relationship that you've absolutely tried your hardest to work out and you're never going to feel recognised, heard or respected, you have every right to assert your need to do what's right for you. And Mars is going to help you, but there could be a very tense moment, I feel, around the 6th or the 7th, maybe the 5th, 6th or 7th. But then, if you want to try something really different, radical and fresh, your confidence to drive that forwards could surprise people because they see you as being uber cautious, but when you really get the bit between your... With year 2025 absolutely racing by, you can order your year 2026 Natal Forecast now, and I'll give you the rest of this year free, but also 30% off and your Life Roadmap Report, the most important document any of us can ever read, helping to give us searing insights into the life patterns that have played out so far, but a much more intimate understanding of how to work with those energies future forwards. Please see the link below for more. So Aquarius, your August 2025 forecast suggests there's going to be some very earnest conversations this month. But the key in all conversations is working on our listening skills. We live in a world which is uber competitive but also hugely polarized. So many people seem to be entrenched in very different opinions and having a battle of wills about that. Now, your gift this month could be that you can be the intermediary, the person who works between two different factions to try to get a better dialogue going. But if you are in a relationship yourself, of any kind, it doesn't have to be a romantic one, which isn't quite working for you, the full moon in your sign on the 9th is certainly going to emphasize your dissatisfaction, not least because Mercury is retrograde through to the 11th. But Mercury starts this month in a very tight conjunction with the Sun. If you recall, as July came to a close, they were totally unified in what's known as a cazimi. Now, because it's an inferior conjunction, because of the retrograde, we might think, ooh, Mercury retrograde in the 7th house, there's bound to be crosswise around a relationship. Well, I have to agree, there's certainly the potential, and that's where Mercury, being the ruler of the second decan of your sign, gives you an advantage. Now, some astrologers, and I agree with this, feel that Mercury is accidentally exalted in Aquarius because of Aquarius people's natural penchant for chatting, sharing information, and also being open to developing trends, which comes from Uranus. Saturn, the other ruler, much more to do with the traditional side of the sign of Aquarius. But that ability to be very open-minded and non-judgmental, which is uniquely Aquarius, I feel, certainly can help you if there are some of those inevitable little bits of tension that can come with Mercury retrogrades. But I actually feel it's your other ruler, Saturn, which is going to perhaps be a bit more of a mischief maker at the start of this month. He's still in an alliance with Neptune, itself hugely complex, but they're both squaring off to the relator, Venus, at the start of this month. It would be easy to have a conversation and focus on what's not quite working around any situation, whether it's with a colleague, someone not performing quite as accurately or as carefully. That kind of stuff could go on, but that's where your talent for not being judgmental, just hearing what people say, being even-handed, can be so helpful to you. But Mars, the planet of desire, and if we're honest, impatience, has been in a part of your chart for the 5 weeks before August, which is very much to do with a deeper, more passionate impulse. Sometimes we're not always conscious of what we're being drawn or motivated towards. That's Mars's rulership of Scorpio more than Aries. Whether it's been someone you've been strongly drawn to romantically, or whether it's been improving your financial situation, Mars is coming into an exact opposition with Saturn and Neptune on or from the 6th, because it moves into your sister air sign of Libra. Now for you personally, this can be fantastic. The following 6 weeks can give you a huge desire to break out, be more adventurous, perhaps even be a bit more physically active, travel somewhere. But because Mars is very much about that excitement and impulse, some things might happen quite quickly. But if you do find yourself having a discussion with someone who doesn't have your talent for hearing either side of the story, who does tend to be very entrenched, who can be very inflexible, you could find around about the 5th, 6th or 7th of this month that you end up having, despite your best intentions, quite a standoff with someone. But it may be someone that you feel is trying to force their ideas upon you. But it's also important to understand that other people might see you in that way too. So there are some tender tensions at the start of this month. Mercury retrogrades, we know, can be those misunderstandings. So care is needed. But I feel collectively for Aquarius people, it is about relationships at the start of this month, but it's not about bend into other people's world to the point that you give away your identity. And that's really what Mars thrusting into your 9th house does as it inches forwards and forges one of the most stunning alliances of the whole year. It's linking to Pluto and Uranus back to Mars. So Pluto in Aquarius, Uranus newly arrived in Gemini, Mars newly arrived in Libra, grand air trine. Let's think about the archetypes. Pluto in your sign is pushing you to manifest your individuality. Uranus in Gemini, since the 7th of July, is pushing you to have more confidence to embrace that more futuristic and rebellious side of your nature and not be quite so bound up in the conforming energies of Saturn. I think most Aquarius people, but particularly early Aquarius people, can feel a bit conflicted between being a bit zany and progressive and also sticking with what they know. But this could be a real paradigm breaker. You could cut through in a really exciting way. And then with the full moon, if there is a situation where you feel, however much you show that decency, humanity, understanding that people have different viewpoints, if something's not working around any kind of connection, be it with a friend, a business contact, maybe a relative, could be even a partner, I feel that you have to express what you need, despite the Sun and Mercury in the early part of the month, and Venus the relator, asking you in a way to be very conscious of how it is for someone else. And once Mercury goes direct on the 11th, and then in tandem with that glorious ground air trine, Venus moves forward and links in a potentially very fortunate way to Jupiter. So we have the two planets in traditional astrology of fortune, Venus the lesser, Jupiter the greater, cresting together by the 12th in a lovely way. Now for you, they're in the 6th house, which can be about work, can be about where we can purify things. It's pretty difficult with Venus and Jupiter to be too conscientious about our diet, to be honest. The 6th house can be about those kind of strands. But you could, for example, go out with someone you work with and have a very sociable time. Or you could connect to someone completely spontaneously in the most unexpected situation. You know, it may be that you just sat in a coffee bar and then someone just turns. There's a moment where some kind of electric connection that could have some serendipity attached to it is possible. And this could be also the case if you travel somewhere or you do something completely different from your normal routines, because Uranus in the 5th house, after all the turbulence of the last 7 years, I mean, obviously it is just for 5 months through to the 7th of November, but it is a chance to be much freer. And, you know, Mars being in Libra is about relating, but for you it's relating with a sense of adventure. And then as we get to the 22nd, the Sun does dive deep. It moves into the psychological sector of deep transformations. But if you've tried everything to hear someone out, to lean into their situation, and they're still not hearing where you're coming from, so it's not a democratic give and take, because the Sun squares with Uranus, particularly through the new moon of the 23rd, that may be your opportunity to actually break completely free. Because I think for us Aquarius people, as much as we can have lots of different people, lots of different types of people we connect to, there are certain principles that do define deeper and closer relationships. And if you feel that someone is really not going to ever be conscious of your right to see things as you do, you may feel it is better if you call it a day. However, Venus moves on the 25th into the most beautiful part of its entire journey for you, the 7th house, into Leo. So if there was going to be a separation, well, you can still be friends. Or if you don't want to be friends, you can at least be respectful, or understanding if there is a bit of emotion that gets evoked, or you can express your need for extra space in a diplomatic way, or you could connect to someone at the end of this month, which really is a new connection that's developing in a way that is very surprising to you, but actually can be hugely life-changing. So it's quite the month, Aquarius, to be honest. And if you pitch in and give it the best of you, the higher vibration of your sign, and people don't reach a reasonable level within your expectations, at least you'll know you've tried everything you can. But I think it can also be an opportunity to break free or break through your own inhibitions in some ways about how you can set your posture to the world at large, because that link between Pluto, Uranus and Mars is a belter. With year 2025 absolutely racing by, you can order your year 2026 Natal Forecast now, and I'll give you the rest of this year free, but also 30% off and your Life Roadmap Report, the most important document any of us can ever read, helping to give us searing insights into the life patterns that have played out so far, but a much more intimate understanding of how to work with those energies future forwards. Please see the link below for more. So Pisces, your August 2025 forecast begins with Venus, the planet of love and affection, having moved into a most beautiful part of your chart, the 5th house. And just to tease, by the 12th of the month, Venus is going to connect with your traditional ruler Jupiter in a potentially hugely lovely and lucky way. These are the two planets of fortune in traditional astrology, but the 5th house that they occupy can be about speculation, but it also can be about neat romance and sociability. But you know, although Venus moved into that area late last month, I don't feel that you will be focusing on playfulness and sociability right at the start of the month. Instead of which, I think you may be focusing on some practical details, because that's where the Sun is, house 6, along with the sign of precision, Mercury. But Mercury is in retrograde through to the 11th. And one of the things that I feel really defines you as a sign, as a collective, is that Pisces people will give a lot if you're at least respected. If you're respected but also appreciated, you can give everything of yourself. But if you feel that you're giving a lot and not really feeling heard, seen, recognised, that's something that can cause some issues. And that can see you go the opposite way and feel much more cautious about giving to situations. And that could be the dimension that you find yourself at the start of this month. So for example, if you work for someone, yes, you may get the pay, but usually for most people, we want more than that. We want to work with people where it's convivial. We want to feel there's a good atmosphere. We want to feel that the work we do is appreciated. It's not that you necessarily want to be knighted for services to industry, but just really respected. And if there is a shortfall at the start of this month, it's something that could be engaging you in quite a big way. Now, people can see you as someone who's not so focused on the practical side of things. They see you sometimes as being a bit dreamy, but you can cut through, and you may find yourself with Mercury retrograde getting onto an issue that you're not particularly satisfied with. For example, it may be that a colleague does a lot less than you and seems to be a lot more acknowledged or popular. That type of thing could really rankle. And if also you're not being rewarded as much as someone else, and you know it, that also could be something that starts to burn away, particularly as Mars steps forwards from the part of your chart where he's been encouraging you to set your boundaries over the previous 5 weeks of August, and by the 6th moves into your 8th house. This is where for the next 6 weeks you're going to take your financial future very seriously indeed. But he goes into an exact opposition with Saturn and Neptune, who are in your second house of your solar chart for the whole of this month, very closely together. Neptune, your modern ruler, of course, highly sensitive, very impressionable, can be a mystical influence, but Saturn in the second house is making you much more aware of the cost of living, but also the cost of giving. And because Neptune and Saturn square off with Venus at the start of the month, that generosity of spirit you often show may be something you're going to be less inclined to give. But also, once the opposition between Mars and Saturn and Neptune occurs, if it is very clear to you that someone's withholding what is fair in terms of your sacrifice, your industry, your thoughtfulness, your conscientiousness, it really could burn in you. And there may be a major between the 5th, 6th and 7th discussion which could get quite tense. It depends on your unique situation, but also the 9th sees the full moon, but it's in the most psychological part of your chart. If you also feel that there's an environment where things aren't truly honest, people hold things back, there's criticisms, but it's done in a sly way, that kind of office backstabbing may be something that you really could feel very undermined by from the 9th. But on the 11th, Mercury does go direct. That's going to help. If there have been some misunderstandings over small details, they can start to be evened out. But it's also true that from the 8th through to the 10th, that newly arrived Mars in your 8th house, very passionate, very scorpionic, forges an amazing link with the other ruler of Scorpio, Pluto, in the 12th house, of deep, profound experiences that you've had over many years, but then linking to Uranus, the planet of change, in your 4th house of home and emotion. Is there something that does need to shift that won't necessarily be easy? That's the big question, the existential question for you. But then on the 12th, or really from the 9th to the 15th, things soften. Venus and Jupiter can see a discussion maybe following on from the very tense full moon and that opposition between Mars, Saturn particularly, and there may be a chance to get things onto a much better footing. There may be a new agreement that's forged. It might even be in a personal situation that you're just getting a partner to be much more conscious of what you have to offer, what your value is. But the fifth house can also be profoundly playful, quite flirty. If you are going out and about and you're socializing, even though at this time in the month the sun is essentially quite practical, if you do, you could have a lovely, lovely connection, a beautiful evening, some great conversations. But then on the 22nd, the sun moves to replace Mars in your sector of relating. The new moon on the 23rd. Set those intentions you can, but it is about perhaps using the energy of Mars through to the 6th and the previous 6 weeks of being clear about what you will or will not do. But if you're not happy in a professional situation, because Uranus is now in a part of your chart that can affect your emotions a lot more in a very vivid way, you could make some quick decisions over the following month around all sorts of connections. Maybe it won't be to do with your work, maybe it will be to do with a friendship. You need to feel recognized and respected. You're not, as I mentioned, looking for people to give you an added level of praise. It's just, if that is there, you're all in. If it's not, you could really feel very, very unsure about what to do. And then, as the month draws to a close, there could be a new contact you make, a new connection, which is really exciting. Also, Venus moves into your sector of work and obligations on the 25th, and that also can see you change a little bit in your relationship to some of the more challenging energies of this month. But as the month draws to a close, I think relationships is the big part of the story. But Uranus is asking those relationships to be very authentic from an emotional viewpoint. And yes, again, the sun and the new moon can see you quite happy to give, but there has to be a fair get. So I feel the exchange of energy, effort, respect is really at the core of what this month is about for you. Now, money could be in the mix, but I don't think it's the essential issue. I think it's more to do with the emotional dimension of how it's all discussed or how you feel recognized, whether you feel people really see just how conscientious and virtuous you can truly be. With year 2025 absolutely racing by, you can order your year 2026 Natal Forecast now, and I'll give you the rest of this year free, but also 30% off and your Life Roadmap Report, the most important document any of us can ever read, helping to give us searing insights into the life patterns that have played out so far, but a much more intimate understanding of how to work with those energies future forwards. Please see the link below for more.